Okay, it is 6:02. I will call the regular meeting with closed session for January 16th, 2020 to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Gentry.
Here.
Mr. Guerin.
Here.
Mr. Troy.
Here.
Mr. Quagliano. Mrs. Melendi.
Here.
Mrs. Maiorino. Mr. Fleck.
Here. We have a quorum. With that, at 6:03, I will make a motion to go into closed session for the items listed in the agenda.
Second.
Second from Mr. Troy. Roll call, please.
Mr. Quagliano. Mr. Fleck.
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi.
Yes.
Mr. Guerin.
Yes.
Mr. Gentry.
Yes.
Mr. Troy.
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino.
Okay, we are in closed session. right, it's 7:05. We are done with closed session. We have one action item to take, but first let's take a roll call.
Mr. Gentry.
Here.
Mr. Guerin.
Here.
Mr. Troy.
Here.
Mr. Quagliano.
Here.
Mrs. Melendi.
Here.
Mrs. Maiorino. Mr. Fleck.
Here. Okay. We do have a quorum to continue. We actually have two items. One will be later on in the meeting, but this one is regarding a recommendation. I'm going to make a motion to recommend that student 2020-01 be expelled for one semester through summer school 2020. That the expulsion be held in abeyance based on the student's acceptance and successful completion at the alternative placement Evergreen Academy in Union, Illinois. If student 2020-01 is not accepted at Evergreen Academy or while enrolled at Evergreen Academy violates the terms of enrollment, then the expulsion held in abeyance will be withdrawn and the expulsion will go into effect immediately. If we support this recommendation via motion, then the high school administrative, if the board supports the Huntley High School administrative recommendation, student 2020-01 would be eligible to re-enroll at Huntley High School for the first semester of the 2020-21 school year. During this time of abeyance, student 2020-01 is not permitted to be on District 158 grounds. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Guerin. Let's have a roll call vote.
Mr. Quagliano.
Abstain.
Mr. Fleck.
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi.
Yes.
Mr. Gentry.
Yes.
Mr. Guerin.
Yes.
Mr. Troy.
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino.
Okay. Motion carries. All right. Moving on. Let's move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll have Mrs. Paul's available. Is she here? Got the crowd in the hallway, huh? Okay. Here they are.
So we actually had about 6 kids that were supposed to come. Tons of illnesses going around. So I only had one student actually show up. So we wrestled up. I have 2 teachers here. Their kids are here. A sibling. So I wrestled you up some kids anyway. We got creative. All right, friends, can you come say your name really quick so you can help us with the pledge?
Ava, Abby, Amanda, Keelan,
Marin.
Please stand and face the flag. You can step up by the microphone and can help say it, okay? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, normally we'd have everybody come up, but since you have
Yeah,
one,
that's okay,
we
yeah.
don't want to put them on the spot. So, but thank you very much. Hope the other students get better. We appreciate you being here. And thanks to everybody for pinch hitting tonight.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Item 5 is public comment. Mr. Armstrong, is there any public comment tonight?
No, sir.
Okay. We'll move on to revision and adoption of the agenda. I'm switching computers now because the old one wasn't working. Okay. Going through, let's see, Ms. Lombard, do you have anything? Okay, so no on 7. Okay. Dr. Schlichter? Okay. It looks like we do have something for Mr. Altmeyer. Mr. Zaire? Okay. Dr. Budzinski? Okay. Dr. Del Castillo? Okay. Looks like we have some community relations, we have policy, building and grounds, president's report, and then we got our action items. Is there anything else that needs to be removed from the agenda? Okay. I'll make a motion to revise and adopt the agenda with removal of items 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. Second from Ms. Melendi. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now I'll see where we left off here. Item 9, Mr. Altmeyer.
Thank you very much. The first item that I'm going to discuss is the fiscal service report, standard report that I give the board each month. There are several things on there. I'd be happy to answer any questions. There are a few things I do want to highlight just to definitely make the board aware. As you may recall, the state has $50 million for the last 2 years for a property tax relief grant, which provides school districts with high tax rates relative to other school districts an opportunity to lower the property tax burden on local taxpayers, with the state replacing a portion of the abatement that a school district may provide its taxpayers with the grant. And that grant, the grant was open for school districts to apply for that grant. And as we did in prior year, we did apply for that grant. But I do want to make the board aware that we already have a relatively low tax rate versus other unit districts. And we're currently on the estimated list. They do have an estimated ranking. And we're ranking 271st out of 851 districts that were on that list. So the likelihood of us receiving the eligibility and or notice that we would be one of the districts that would be awarded that grant are relatively small. But that being said, if you don't apply, well, then you don't have an opportunity to do well by your taxpayers and receive the grant from the state of Illinois. So with that, I just do want to let the board know that we have applied. The selection process does begin on January 31st, so we will be notified at that date whether or not we are one of the districts on that list for the property tax relief grant. Other items I do want to mention, minivans for transportation. I think I mentioned it last month. We have been looking at a few minivans. We have several minivans that are 10, 12 years old, have a ton of miles on them. We are looking to replace a few of those, so we will be bringing that to the board next month, and those are all in line with the state contract. On February 6th, we are releasing the transportation bus bid, and within that bus bid, we will be looking and requesting bids for diesel buses, wheelchair buses, as well as propane buses. So we are looking forward to that, and we will bring that forward as well in February, so stay tuned with that. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have regarding the fiscal update memo.
Any questions?
On the relief grant, that ranking, is that strictly like a stack ranking of tax rates, or is there some other methodology?
Well, it is based on tax rate, but there is a formula based on whether you're a unit district, elementary district. Right?
Okay, but simplistically, is it just adjusting for those?
Yeah, they revised the
rates?
calculation. They revised the calculation from prior year because last year they used a calculation which was heavily weighted towards high school districts. And if you look at the majority of the districts that actually received the grant last year, it was high school districts. And many of those high school districts were actually Tier 4 districts, meaning they really didn't need additional funding. And they're well-off districts, maybe Lake County districts. So they changed the calculation this year to make it a little more equitable between high school districts versus elementary versus unit.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much. You have the...
Oh, I'm still up, yes.
Yeah, you got the floor for a while.
Yes, in front of you, you have the financial executive summary for November. So we do continue to track very tightly with budget, but definitely within budget. I do want to point out, as we always talk about, health insurance. You'll notice on page 2 of the report, November total claims were 562,000. We've been trending between $700,000 and $800,000 a year for claims, so that was very good news. However, we do have the December claim number, and the December claim number came in at, well, it popped back up to 764,000. I think what's more important is every month, we're hitting the $700,000 or $800,000 claim number, but almost equally important is every month we receive a stop-loss credit, and the credit represents those large claims in the pipeline that exceed, the stop-loss amount. And during the month, even though we only had $562,000 of claims, which is great, we did receive $155,000 credit towards stop-loss. And stop-loss year-to-date, the credits that we've received as of November were $732,000. With the December, we also received $157,000 of stop-loss credit in December. That totals $890,000 approximately in stop-loss credit. That is almost double last year's stop-loss credit. So what that indicates is we've got a lot of large claims in the pipeline. And so we're working with our broker to better understand and quantify the exact number that are making up these stop-loss credits. Because of HIPAA, it's not that easy to obtain all that information, but we are doing that just to have a better understanding of where we are and how this trend may continue. So we'll continue to monitor that. Fortunately, we're still tracking very closely with the health insurance budget, so we'll continue to watch that. Other important item to note, the categoricals on this November report, we do have a receivable of $1.142 million. However, in December, we did receive the first quarter categorical, which was a month before we received that first quarter categorical last year. So the state is paying us a little earlier than in prior year. If you look at the dashboard, I do want to point out, we're very consistent with prior year. I'm really not too concerned on any of the line items, with the exception of health insurance at this point. But I do want to point out impact and transition fees. We are trending very favorably to prior year, and we do look and we're tracking definitely to meet and or exceed the current year budget. So that is also very favorable news with the new residences, primarily new residences that we are putting in the community. So other than that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have on the financial executive summary.
Questions? I have a question on the stop loss.
Sure.
I got maybe a couple. When you speak with the broker, can you see if this is a kind of a trend, or are we an outlier on exceeding prior year stop loss numbers? If it's a one-off that happens, and leading to the second question, with our experience with stop loss this year, could that impact our rate for that coverage next year?
Well, I can tell you that it certainly will impact, our future rates for stop loss insurance moving forward. I do know that much of the stop loss is tied to specialized drugs, right? All claims are broken out between medical and or pharmaceutical, RX. A lot of the stop loss does have to do with RX claims.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll try to see if I can even break that down further so that I could provide that information to the board.
Very good. Any other questions for Mr. Altmeyer? Okay. I think that concludes item 9. Moves us on to item 13, community relations, 13.1 FOIA requests. Mr. Armstrong?
You have the report. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Anybody want to talk about the $9 cost of the FOIA request? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Moving on. Policy updates. Turn it over to Ms. Myrino.
Yes, good evening. Looks like we have a press update. Ms. Woods?
Yeah, if you can come
Laura,
on
you
up.
can come on up. There are a couple of things in there, policy 4190 and policy 7180. You're going to see that those are later in the agenda that we're going to take action on because those would be the second reading. So those won't move forward here because we already did that. And then you'll take the action on that. And then administration would like to pull policy 530 for us to do a little bit deeper review on, and we will go ahead and bring that back to the board at the regular meeting.
Okay.
To go to the cow first.
Well, we could discuss it here, and then we could pull it and then come, or we could just bring it back to the cow in
Why don't we
February.
just bring it to the committee of the
Cow.
whole?
Sure.
Yeah. That way we'll be able to really digest it and
Perfect.
kind of go through it. Does anybody object to that? Procedurally?
Okay.
Okay.
I've been doing policy for about 8 years now, and I had to tell all the cabinet members that this was the largest packet I've ever seen in my entire life. So, with that, and it's probably fitting that it followed a packet that was the smallest that I'd ever seen. So anyway, most of these changes are due to Illinois compiled statute changes or amendments to the public acts. There are a few changes to legal references and cross-reference updates. And of course, the largest concentration is due to the legalization of cannabis, which affects several of our policies. Do you have any questions first? Okay, I'm done then.
And as Mrs. Wood said, that a lot of those were based on some of the new laws that took into place. That's partially why we're going to pull 530 and look at that one just a little bit deeper as we were rereading some of those components. There were a few pieces in there that press recommendation was to make sure that we did review things with our legal counsel, and so that has been done on some of these policies as well. And most of the updates were things that we were either already doing or very comfortable with. There is one press update was for one of the mandated reporting trainings. They did change that. It has to be done within the first 3 months. Most of our employees, that is something that they have to get done before their employment. And then it was once every 5 years, and we are going to require that and keep that annually. So that was one piece that we did not recommend a change in. We do feel very strongly that that is something to refresh all of our staff on annually.
Okay. All right. So are there any questions on the two action items that we're going to take action on later? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Woods. Appreciate it. We'll see you at the committee of the whole. All right. Item 15, Building and Grounds reports. I'll turn it over to Mr. Rinkosik.
I'm sorry. There's one thing I didn't put in the O&M updates because I just got the good news yesterday. I'm very proud to announce we've got a certificate yesterday at the Strategic Energy Management Cohort from selected school districts in the state of Illinois who participated in this cohort over the last 12 months. And our school district had the most percent savings over the year. They had modeled our consumption with the energy data prior to the year. And then due to, they attribute to their coaching in our operations, we saved 42,732 kilowatt hours last year, 5%. So we got an award for, of all the districts participating, saving the most energy over the last 12 months. Everybody probably wants to know how the solar is doing, so I'll throw that in a little bit. I hear that a lot. A little factoid for us. I took a moment to do this a couple days ago because people are asking me, how many solar panels are there? There are 14,117 solar panels being installed in our school district on the 3 campuses. there are 521 inverters being installed in our school district. Other topics about solar. The latest schedules are in there, and if you look, kind of hard to read the Gantt charts that are in there, but it looks like we're creep back to now like somewhere in the third week of March before we commercial operational at this point. I'm very thankful that the weather's been fairly cooperative, or it could have been a lot worse. So that's fairly good news. That's about all I want to say about the solar, unless we have questions. I'm very active. The O&M office is very active in bidding right now. There have been published advertisement for bids for asphalt seal coat, which would take care of the asphalt we replaced last year to lock in all those good materials that were laid down on the ground, on the surface. Through-wall flashing repairs is a repair item. It wasn't in the project list, but we've had a couple of places at Heinemann Middle School, which are leaks that are the kind of expense that warrants bidding, and it'll come out of the repair fund budget. There's an item out to bid today called exterior window repairs at Marlow Middle School, and this has been an ongoing problem I talked to the board about earlier. There's a line item in the project budget for the year I proposed in August for reworking the window sills at the curtain walls on the perimeter. We're getting close to being ready to go out to bid for asphalt replacement at the Conley Muscatine School parking lots. That should be out to bid before we meet again, is my goal. There are several attachments in the O&M updates today. Our latest Energy Star ratings, I know that's always important to us, and where are we? How are we performing? It looks like, according to we're eligible to apply for Energy Star rating for several more buildings, and how Energy Star works now is you have to reapply to be recognized, continue to be carried as recognized Energy Star rated buildings, and it's time to do that. CTS is working on that. Not sure if they got the paperwork in time. They're trying to work through that right now. But the good news is we are recognized now we're back to five buildings, right? 5 buildings that are Energy Star rated. There are a couple that creep down a little bit, and I'm looking at those and talking to partners who reached out to me about retro commissioning opportunities to maybe bring in some consultants to help us look deeper in those buildings as to why they regressed a smidge. And we will continue to work on that. I put some information in the packet for you. Ooh, pretty deep in there. Oh, yes. Well, there's a number in there. On water sewer budget, I'm going to give you the heads up. It's been bothering me for a while. The rates are creeping up, and noticeably so lately, by the way. There we go. It is page 15 of that item. You'll see across the top of the page there, a little bar chart that shows you over a 15-year period. There's 2 years there that are projected, and the reason they're projected is the village of Algonquin and the village of Huntley have already had approved their rates for those coming years, and a multiple-year rate approval several years ago. And why? And what's really kind of odd, you may know that our Reed Road campus has Lake in the Hills addresses. They have the wonderful Huntley water, however, which is really good quality water. Very thankful for that. But another good thing is they have Lake in the Hills Sanitary District for the sanitary services. So when I combine those costs, as you can see at the bottom of the page, by the time we get to that last fiscal year, what kind of rate? Now, one thing I have to say here that is that what I did was I took the last 12 months' history of volume, and I just put the rates for those prior years. Because if we tried to look at the school district as we were growing like crazy, you can't really get a good feeling for how the rate is changing, you know. So I guess I could have did this in terms of rate also, and maybe it would have made more sense. But you know, when we were smaller, we had less volume, obviously. But it's based on the last 12-month consumption, how our rate, it's a demonstration of how our rate is going up, and it's going to continue to march. So you should notice in the next few fiscal years, hopefully Mr. Altmile will allow me to ask him to raise that budget because the bills are coming. Last thing in the packet I want to bring to the board's attention is that we finally got the results of our annual demand load response test, our participation in reducing our electrical demand load. When we participate in the program, we have to demonstrate that we can perform as requested. And if we can perform, then we get some nice checks every year. I think last year we got $46,000, somewhere in that range. Some years we've got over $100,000. We did very well, as you can see by the reports in the last 3 pages for the 3 campuses. We exceeded the deference that we were committed to do. So we're very happy about that. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I want to go back to the water.
Okay. I
So-
thought you might.
Yeah, no. One of my pet peeves with Algonquin.
Well,
They must
did
pay
you
a
notice
rate.
that I put in there a long report from the village on, they hired someone to do a comprehensive study on their rates. And I talked to the Public Works Director, Bob Mitchard, and he was very, he wanted to make sure that I was aware that I'm not sure how the other villages operate, but they say that they fund all their capital projects to improve and renovate in their water sewer system out of the rates. They do not have a separate fund or budget coming out of the village or anything. It's a totally self-standing operation. So that was part of, he wanted to make sure I knew that as we looked at
I'm trying to recall
1758
what
in
my
a
bill
couple
looks
years.
like, but I could have swore there's a rate for infrastructure, and I thought there's a separate rate for the water, and they're identical rates. You have to go back and look, but I swear to God.
If you read that 37 or so pages in there, you'll see that they discussed like 8 or 9 different options, I thought. 8, I think there's 8, on how to structure the rates for the future, and some were to separate that a little bit, and they chose a certain way to go.
Okay. Well, however you want to look at it, we have more students at Reed Road, correct? Than we have at than we have.
Mr. Basinski would have to answer that.
Than we have here.
It's just less than double the amount of students.
Yeah.
At Reed Road.
Yeah, and the water bill at Reed Road is, if I'm doing quick math here, like a fourth. I mean, 1/4, not 75%. It's not even close.
Yes.
I mean, Huntley's higher, but they're in line. I mean, Algonquin's outrageous. I mean, they do a good job of, obviously, their systems are at the high end, but.
Well, I have to say
they're
the quality of the
charging.
water in Huntley is much, much better.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Making me feel
We have to
better.
soften the water in Algonquin.
I think I need to go to Algonquin Village meeting one of these days. Voice my discontent with it. Yeah. All right.
I'll go with you because my office is in Algonquin, so.
All right.
I'll chime
I'll
in.
look at their report in detail and I'll get a better idea.
All right, anything else on the water or anything else that was presented in the report? No. All right. Thank you for that. We'll move on to the Fine Arts Edition.
Well, I'm very thankful nature has been cooperative, and LAMP has worked hard to work with the contractors to get us to the point we are, and that it looks like roofing is starting tomorrow. And once we have a waterproof roof membrane, a little insulation up there, LAMP's team in the field told me on the phone this morning that it looks like we'll be able to enclose and heat and work inside and start finishing it off, which is really good news. It was kind of questionable for a while when we had a 6-inch snowstorm and Halloween and some nasty weather going through Veterans Day where we didn't know if it was going to shut the project down, but things turned around to our favor. So, and thanks to their hard work, they've been able to get us where we are. But it's looking positive, like our goals of completion. Unless I'm wrong, Chad, I think who's sitting in the audience there, I think we're pretty good. The only thing that I would ask to give the boards a heads up on is that there are a few costing items that I've been left sitting on my desk to pull together a package of items that were owner expenses listed on the overall budget. Buying music lockers for the band program band and orchestra expansion. Stage curtains for the black box, the bids were rejected. We're going to rebid it. Audio visual for the black box, lighting for the black box, I have numbers from the technology department and our chief security officer on technology and security. And I've been sitting on all those waiting to try to get all the final numbers for all the pieces. And we're pretty close, but I'm not exactly there. I've been waiting because if the numbers didn't all add up to our goal, I was thinking we might want to revisit some of these things and see if we needed to squeeze a little harder on what we're doing in those areas. But I just got a phone call today from the audiovisual people telling me if we don't release them pretty soon, they might not be able to deliver by the middle of August. And they pleaded with me to consider. There's a process. I know I said that, Tony. They said that they'll have to go through a process of final design. They'll have to go through submittals and then field gathering information and all this stuff. And their summer books filling and all this. So, when I told them that I'd really like to think maybe we went through committee on February 6th to have I have a goal in mind that I have no real control over, but I'm pushing people to try to get all the other numbers collected in time for the committee meeting on February 6th. However, I'm not 100% confident I'll be there, but and I said the best scenario that for normal flow would be go to the COW on February 6th with the items, and then go to the regular meeting on the 20th for approval. And he said that would make them late. So there's a possibility we might be asking if you could consider a special meeting when you're together on February 6th to kind of move some of these things on so they go with the flow. We've really done a lot of work on the audiovisual to get us to a number that Mr. Beelan, Mr. Kemp, Mr. Napke, Mark, and I and the vendor have won a couple rounds to try to get to a point where we're comfortable that it's going to meet the needs of the building and not be over the top. And so there's probably not a lot of tweaking we're going to do on that one anyway. And our recommendations probably going to have to come from somewhere else, if anything. So I don't know if the board's okay with the idea. I mean, it's in kind of an informal poll. Any issues with a special meeting on February 6th for that?
Yeah, it's not unprecedented, that's for sure.
That's all I have, unless you have any more on this project.
Any questions on the Fine Arts project? Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on.
Oh, no, sorry, I was looking for it here.
You good?
I can't find it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Then moving on to the President's report, this is where we're going to do legislative updates. This one is just let you know, federal legislative report instead of the state, which is what we usually do here. Education funding federally has been increased for Title I and Title II fairly significantly. A $450 million increase under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is Title I, and $400 million increase for the IDEA grant. There's Title II, it had a $76 million increase, but I wanted to point out social emotional learning received $123 million federally increase. And there was some extra funding for school safety and a few other things that didn't apply to us, but and for STEM research. So that's something we don't normally cover, but there was in that omnibus bill there was quite a bit that went into education. Okay. That's informational only. Next item. And we go on to the action items, so we'll start going through. First item, 17.1, is the meeting minutes for the Committee of the Whole of December 5th, regular meeting on December 19th, and the levy hearing on December 19th. Is there any comments on that? If not, I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Second from Ms. Melendi. This is a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Moving on to human resources. Let's see. Got the personnel report. Mr. Zare, do you have anything for that?
Nothing to add.
Okay. We'll seek approval of the personnel report as presented in the agenda. I'll make a motion for that. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gentry. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Fleck?
Yes, motion carries. 17.2.2, this is the grievance submitted by HEA on behalf of Lindsay Sarah. I'm going to make a motion that the Board of Education affirm the decision of the superintendent to deny the grievance submitted by the Huntley Education Association. Written decision will be submitted to the Huntley Education Association on behalf of the Board of Education. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gentry. Roll call, please.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino?
Okay, motion carries. Moving on to Finance Committee, 17.3.1. We have a debt refunding abatement resolution. Mr. Altmeyer.
Thank you very much. This abatement has become, fairly standard operating procedure, so to speak. If you recall, we started doing this in 2007 with the 2006A bonds, which were ultimately refunded to 2009 and then refunded again with the 2016 bonds. This is for the Marlowe edition, which it was agreed at the time would be paid out of future impact fees. So we do abate the debt amount due on an annual basis. The amount that we're abating this year is $471,675 in accordance with the Series 2016 debt repayment schedule. And so we are asking the board to approve the attached resolution so that we can go ahead and file that abatement.
Any questions or discussion?
Where are we at again on the timeline of start to finish?
There are only, I believe, I may be wrong, I meant to bring the audit report with me. I think there's only 3 more years of payments approximating $471,000
Okay. And it's been
per year.
this basic amount for the last few years as well?
For the last few years,
Yeah.
last year was $468,000 we abated.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-0101 for debt abatement in the amount of $471,675 as listed in the agenda. Second. Second from Mr. Quagliano. This is a roll call.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, 17.3.2, payables. Mr. Altmeyer, do you have anything you want to highlight here?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the payables as listed in the agenda and the amounts listed.
Second.
Second from Mr. Gentry. It's roll call.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi?
Okay. Next item, 17.3.3, our board member expenses. These have been submitted. There we go. We got what, one?
This is outrageous.
All right. We got one. Board member.
I have nothing to add.
No, we walked there. We didn't park or anything. So, okay.
I did.
Yeah. I'm going to make a motion to approve the board member expense as listed in the agenda. Is there a second? Okay, second from Ms. Maiorino Scheiblein. Let's have a roll call.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Quagliano? Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries for the only board member that submitted their expenses. Congratulations. Nice. 17.3.4. Yeah.
I ran a fundraiser for my expenses.
Yeah. Audit engagement letter. Mr. Altmeyer.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to present you with the district with a 2-year audit engagement letter from Evans, Marshall, and Peace. We've been with them for a while. They are holding the fees flat for 2 years through the engagement period, which are the same fees that we've had for the last 3 years. So very unusual that they would hold that flat for over a 5-year period, but we do appreciate their services. They have become a very valuable partner of ours. So with that, I'm asking the board to approve the attached engagement letter from Evans, Marshall, and Peace for the audits for fiscal year 2020 and 2021.
Seems pretty reasonable. Any discussion?
Just a generic question. Is there any changes to the engagement letter from last time of substance?
No, just standard verbiage that would be in accordance with GASB, I
Okay.
do believe. No, nothing material. They still perform the same services.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, I'll make a motion to approve the 2-year audit engagement letter as presented in the agenda. Second from Mr. Quagliano. Let's have a roll call.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Yeah, motion carries. Moving on to 17.4, building and grounds. Mr. Troy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, this is not an expense submission. Yeah, no, thank you. So we've gotten into a habit, I think it's a good habit, over the last several years of having a board member serve as the agent for the board in regards to making decisions for procuring energy, because those prices tend to shift rather quickly, and so there's not a lot of time in order to go ahead and bring those numbers back to the board and then make a decision and go back and forth. So, like I said, we've gotten into a practice of doing that, and I've served as that agent in the past, and I see my name is attached to this again. So, excuse me, I'm glad to serve. Getting all choked up.
Okay. Didn't know it meant that much to you, so.
I'm touched.
Okay. Any discussion on this?
And it's a no-cost thing to me.
Okay. I won't. Yeah. I'm going to make a motion to authorize Paul Troy as agent for the board for energy procurement contracts as listed in the agenda. Second from Mr. Quagliano. This is a roll call vote, though, so go ahead.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Troy?
I'll go ahead and abstain.
Okay, motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Troy. 17.4.2 is the makeup air system bid. Mr. Rankosik?
This is a project that was on the project list presented to the board for the fiscal year back in August, and we're pleased that the low bidder, very reputable company. We've done a lot of business with them already. They've built some of our additions, done some other renovations. We've interviewed them, see no reason to not recommend it to them. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on that? Bids look in order. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of deviation in the numbers or anything.
No, we actually we budgeted for doing this building and also doing McCaben, because when we had the polar vortex last year, we were rolled a herd on 4 buildings, but financially, in reviewing the budget with Mr. Altmaier before we presented in August, we thought we'd best just do 2, see how it goes, and maybe do the other 2 in the following year. Well, turns out when we actually went to design, the consultants came back and said, well, maybe you need to carry the entire budget to even do one building. So we said, okay, then let's just bid one building. Turns out that the bids came in low enough. We could have probably bid both at once, but we did not. So we'll see how this fares and see how the budget fares, and we may come back and consider doing that other one before the year is done. The
Very
fiscal
good.
year, that is.
Okay. Any other discussion? I'll make a motion to approve the bid award to Jensen Plumbing and Heating in the amount of $68,490 as listed in the agenda.
Second.
Second from Mr. Troy. Roll call, please.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino?
Okay, motion carries. 17.4.3, cafeteria tables.
This is another item that was on the capital projects list for the fiscal year that was printed back in August. The cafeteria tables at Marlow, we tried to repair them. The torsion springs failed, and the replacement torsion springs didn't last hardly a year. And it is a very cumbersome, very hard thing to do, and we want to get them fixed before we have employees getting hurt putting them up and down. They get a lot of cycles at these middle schools, up and down, folding these tables with the operation of the school. Did a lot of research on costs. There's a lot of background here. And we do want to make sure we get a quality table so we get a good long life. And so we looked at the cooperative purchasing process. We actually explored with a couple of vendors cooperative purchasing pricing of a similar table, same manufacturer, et cetera. And we also then double-checked with the cooperative operation support staff directly to make sure we were getting a recognized discount price, and it was confirmed. So we'd like to recommend the purchase of replacing of those 28 the older tables at Marlow, as stated.
Okay. Questions, comments?
No.
Sounds reasonable to me. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the cafeteria table replacement in the amount of $49,428.96. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think I heard that from Mr. Troy. Roll call, please.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi?
Okay, that motion carries. Takes us to 17.4.4, which is the Fine Arts Edition proposed change order number 6. Ms. Brankowski.
This is the first change order we're bringing to the board officially for this project. We've had some minor expenses that are under the radar of prior board approval by way of the approved process, so we can keep the project moving along. Some very small expense items that were tracked in the updates report. But this one is this one's beyond the allowance in the bids in some cases for some of the parties involved, and overall expense is pretty significant. So we want to bring this for approval before we move further. And I was very pleased that Walden Lamp were able to join us to help it once again, maybe just refresh you on what this is about. I'd ask them if they could please come to the podium. And Mr. Armstrong is going to put up a couple of pictures. It's like a before and where we are kind of picture. There's 2 slides here, and it may help Walden Lamp be able to explain to the board what's going on here, what happened, and where they see that we need to go with this. I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you. Once Dan gets the picture up. There we go. There's the before picture.
So this is the piece that we had presented at the previous board meeting, where we had a portion of the cost that was listed out on the list from Doug, which had the column cost, which we were able to. Lamp was able to work with the contractor to get that down. We were still waiting for the demolition cost, which was the actual structure that holds up that low canopy. That came in as the remainder of the cost that's being presented tonight, which is a not-to-exceed cost that Lamp will be tracking on time and materials. So worst-case scenario is listed there, and as they track the time and materials, there's potential for it to be a little bit lower.
If we could, just so the board understands more, could you go to slide 2, please? Well, let's go back to slide 1 a minute. I just want to make sure you're aware. Can you see the column? Here's the column right here. Okay. And your skin down here. Okay, that's an intermediate level. From what I understand, Lance and Woe, when they were designing this, thought that that column went from the ground all the way to the top, uninterrupted. Okay? Go to slide 2. James, keep going that slide. No, it doesn't. Okay. So that was easy. There's a beam. And the beam comes through here. And interrupts the column. And they were surprised that there was a space there. So that's why they're coming to us with this today, I think. Right?
So you're trying to find a resolution for the pipe or fixing the beam intervening on that column?
Yes,
or both?
and yes, it's the entire, the column will
Contraption.
be fixed on both sides.
Okay.
The beams that were holding up that low canopy that you can see that kind of spliced through the column on all 3 sides is being removed. The piping is being removed, taken back into its chase and capped. It's no longer necessary. It serves nothing anymore.
Okay.
And so that all goes away because that's basically where the new vestibule is extending out.
So that section is indoors.
It would be indoors if it were to remain. Yes. So ours, that entire low canopy is completely removed. I believe they have all of the storefront and everything out already. So that's extending out for the connection between that vestibule and the black box.
Maybe to help the board get their arms around this, just one more little bit of explanation. Can you picture the new door 1 entrance? The new look for Huntley High has this column going from the ground all the way up to the top, uninterrupted. And if I understand what you folks are trying to do, your intent is to try to get that same look back here. Is that correct?
Correct.
So they got to do some work on getting rid of that structural member that they didn't know was there.
Here's my question. Please don't be offended by the question, but isn't the architect and the construction manager who built that standing here right now? No?
Not the architect.
Not the architect, okay. So that was a different project.
Yes, this was
Okay.
not.
Well, then I apologize for that assumption. But, how, Mr. Alexander, you guys were there, right?
Yes, unfortunately, back at this time, sometime as-built drawings aren't 100% accurate.
Okay.
And I wasn't on this project personally, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that's the best answer I can give at this point.
Okay, so it happens, and that's all I need to know.
I guess the question is, our drawings would have disclosed it, whether they got missed or not, probably not as relevant is if it was known ahead of time, would that have changed anything in the realm of cost? Are you reacting and spending more money now than you would have had you known it, been aware of it?
No, because of the fact that we're doing this on time materials, and even the initial cost we received, we got before that the coping piece was removed to expose everything there. And actually, a couple of the contractors actually lowered their numbers based on, that's what I'm dealing with. And again, because we're dealing with, it wasn't on our drawing, so it wasn't bid, that work. So now we're getting the actual cost of the actual work because we're doing it on time material. So we believe you're getting fair value for that work.
And this is still going to be exposed metal then, going forward?
Only the 2 columns on either side. So the rest of it will be completely gone. It will look like 2 tall columns. The one on this side that you see is actually basically going to be enclosed. You'll see just the lower portion of it. The one on the other side, you will see the entire height of it. I know, this will actually be inside the new corridor.
The new, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I'm just, I'm a little frustrated with it, right? Because it's, I don't know. It's like $20,000, my gosh, but.
Almost 30.
Well, I'm satisfied with the explanation. Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I think that's a legitimate explanation for why this happened and why we need to address it. And I don't think there's not much we can do about it at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes you think differently. If you do what?
No, I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm the wrong person. It's just.
No, I'm satisfied with the explanation. I just wanted to make it clear for the record. So. All right. Well, thank you for the explanation on that.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in this evening.
Okay. That being said, I will make a motion to approve change order number 6 in the amount of $27,683 for the reasons stated in the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Guerin. Let's have a roll call.
Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Moving on to 17.5, policy. These are the two items that were previously noted in the policy packet that we will be voting on. Is there any questions or comments on these? Okay. With that then, I will make a motion to approve the policy changes for items 4.190 and 7.180 as listed in the agenda. Second from Ms. Maiorino Scheiblein. Let's have a roll call.
Mrs. Maiorino? Mr. Fleck?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Takes care of the action items. Moving on to 18. Mr. Armstrong, do we have any public comment?
I see none.
Okay. There being none then, it is 8:02. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second from Mr. Quagliano. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.